Today's video has been sponsored by Square Enix. It's hard to believe it's already been 4 years since the launch of Final Fantasy XV. It's the very same game that made me create this channel and bestow myself with the name The Night Sky Prince. And now we eagerly await the next mainline entry in the series in the form of Final Fantasy XVI, a title that has potential to both bring Final Fantasy as a series back to its roots, while simultaneously venturing into new territory. And so far, everything that we've seen and heard bodes extremely well for the game. But all that hype aside, today's video is going to be focusing on what Final Fantasy XVI needs to nail, at least from my perspective, to push it into legendary status. But before we dive into all that, a message from today's sponsor, Square Enix, and their epic mobile title, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is one of the coolest mobile JRPGs out there, embodying the spirits of classic Final Fantasy with its gorgeous 2D sprites and a soundtrack that has no business slapping that hard. And now Brave Exvius is collaborating with yet another awesome mobile title, Kingdom Hearts Union Cross Dark Road. Starting November 26th, you'll be able to summon the Kingdom Hearts 3 versions of Sora, Riku, and Kairi, and previously released Kingdom Hearts Collabs units will also be returning as well. There will be one free summon that guarantees you get a Kingdom Hearts unit. And for all you Black Friday shoppers, there's the Black Friday Mithril Chest, including 7,000 Lapis, 100 Star Quartz, and 300 VIP coins, which, by the way, is 5,700 more Lapis than usual. So be sure to check out Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, with this event available from November 26th through to December 9th. First and foremost, and I think I speak for a lot of people in saying this, I really hope this game has a fantastic and diverse group of party members. I don't think there's really any concern for this. It's not too uncommon for Final Fantasy games to only be revealed with the main protagonist, and then party members are announced at a later date. Considering the game's somewhat obvious Western influences, however, it's caused some people concern that the game's party count, or lack thereof, could see the game taking influences from such Western RPGs like The Witcher 3, where you tend to play as only one character. That being said, I still strongly believe this will be a game that has party members, as it just wouldn't be Final Fantasy without it. Even Final Fantasy XIV, an MMO, still has what you would call story-based party members in the form of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, who join you in your journeys and even certain battles. I think this team really understands the importance of party members in this series, and I don't think they'll let us down. In terms of combat, there's only one really strong desire that I have: some form of a command system in combat. While Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake are both action RPGs, one of the massive improvements that Final Fantasy VII Remake makes over 15 is its ATB command system. While Final Fantasy XVI has already shown that it won't simply follow 7R's footsteps, one thing I would love to see are battles continuing to revolve around the use of commands. By keeping the traditional Final Fantasy command system in play on top of action battles, it creates a really engaging system that causes players to both focus on the action mechanics while weaving in traditional Final Fantasy style combat. The end result? Combat is modernized while still keeping the tactical elements that the series is known for. And then there's towns. Towns being the talk of the town wasn't always a thing in the Final Fantasy community. That is until Final Fantasy XIII released, a game which for the most part didn't feature towns in a traditional sense. Following the release of that game, the inclusion of towns has been a focal point of discussions within these games. The Final Fantasy games of yore definitely took us to a diverse range of settings, and through these various locations and cultures, it felt like you were in a living world. And just like in the real world, you don't have to go to every city in the world to get a sense of just how big it really is. Just a few locations spread apart far enough with distinctive cultures and purpose in the world is usually enough to create the illusion of a massive world with the player's imagination connecting the dots. Similarly, Final Fantasy XVI is already set up quite well for this. There are a total of 6 realms, which in my opinion is more than enough to create the illusion of this large immersive world. That is, assuming that these are actually fleshed out locations that we can visit in some form or another. One of the things that I absolutely adore about Final Fantasy XIV is the diverse number of locations, each one feeling lived in and absolutely sprawling. And while its aesthetics offer designs which are absolutely gorgeous, it's that each of these zones worlds are filled with their own lore and interesting oddities that truly make each place a sight to behold. I would love to see this team able to achieve the same level of immersion with Final Fantasy XVI, which leads me to my next point. I sincerely hope this game has a great emphasis on its world and level design. As I mentioned before, I personally am indifferent to whether they go with a linear design or an open world. I think there are plenty of examples of good and bad design in both categories. If they go with a linear design, please keep things well paced like Final Fantasy X. Not a single environment overstays its welcome, and it guides you right to the next major story event with ease. That being said, the assumption is that this new Final Fantasy title will almost certainly be an open world game. This series, however, is still quite new to the open world scene, and still has much to be proven. Making a great open world is challenging in its own right, and even listing off all the things that make a good open world good would take its own video essay. That being said, I think there are a lot of games out there that the general consensus would agree are excellent open world design and would probably make great reference points. That being said, one of the things that truly elevates an open world game are its side quests and optional content. Unfortunately, in more modern games than it should be, side quests tend to be a lot of busy work, tasked purely for the purpose of grinding and giving the player something to do. When optimally used, side content can enhance the world in ways that books and television simply can't. So it's honestly quite hilarious that it's most prominently used to make the player go kill 5 giant rats. Let's be real, every game is going to have some degree of filler content, but I think side quests are at their best when they're either consequential to their main narrative or contribute something profound to the lore of the world. Final Fantasy XIV being a near perfect example of this. There are several pieces of side content, duties, raids that can be entirely missed. Meanwhile, the main story quest is completely comprehensive without these things. Though if you truly want to dig deeper into the lore and learn more about the world and its inner workings, these quests serve to contribute to that and add richness to the world, as well as to its people and their motivations, which always don't fit in the course of the main narrative. Above all else though, I think there is one thing that continues to bring the series fans back time and time again. Even without saying it, you probably already know what it is. A truly heartfelt story. One that truly resonates with the player. Currently they have a great setup going with Clive. See? I said it right this time, not Cleve, Clive, and seeing how his revenge story will unfold. Or so we assume. In either case, I'm open to wherever the story might lead, however, there is one stipulation. I think that this story needs to be something that truly feels complete when you finish it, without any major missing details sold as external media or DLC. That being said, I'm not closed-minded to those ideas either, and they could be implemented in some rather good ways. However, I personally rather their implementation prioritize the satisfaction with the base product first before they add any accessory content. Ultimately, Final Fantasy XVI has all the inner workings to become an absolutely stellar game, and there is absolutely no team that I trust more to do this than the Final Fantasy XIV team. Currently, I've been playing through Final Fantasy XIV over on my Twitch channel, and I'm currently in the middle of Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood, and absolutely loving it. And if you'd like to watch me play, head on over to twitch.tv/thenightskyprince. But when it's all said and done, these are the things that would elevate Final Fantasy XVI above the crowd for me. But is there something that I missed that's important to you? Subscribe, click the bell icon, and let me know in the comments below. And be sure to check out Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, available now on iOS and Android.